I wanted to do another video uh, kind of sharing where I am spiritually, and I wanted to title it Wrestling with God, maybe as a subtitle, the title being something like Psychology and Faith. And, how we feel has a lot to do with how we relate to God. And psychology to me has been very, very important since the age of 14. So that's a long time ago. And I've been wrestling with God in these last times, and especially with the coronavirus and what that represents for our fragility. And I wanted to share some reflections, which I'm not even sure where they're going to lead. But I did want to do a video, maybe a short one. But as I have the habit of doing every morning, I read a page or two from 5 or 6 books. And then I settle down into a book that I, really enjoy. But one of the books that I've been reading is the Jewish Study Bible, second edition, which I believe to be the best for knowing the Old Testament, as Christians call it. And this part that I'm reading, in the end of this Bible, just the essays, uh, regards Jewish philosophical interpretation of the Bible. And one of the uh, main points that is stressed is that the Bible is fundamental to Judaism, which might seem to be commonplace or obvious, but I don't think it's quite that obvious. Just like in the Catholic Church, as opposed to the Protestant churches, in rabbinic Judaism, the Judaism that is the classic, mainstream, most widespread Judaism, you have tradition, you have a ways of understanding the Bible that is not strictly limited to the text, as in a lot of fundamentalistic Protestant religion. They think they can only use the Bible and that they read it only literally. And of course, that is not, that's what the Pontifical Biblical Commission in its 1993 document, The Interpretation of the Bible in the Church, calls intellectual suicide. But my point is that in Catholicism, you have the sacred scriptures and sacred tradition, and they go hand in hand in transmitting what God has revealed. In the Jewish mainstream tradition, the prevalent one, the rabbinic Judaism, you have an oral Torah, which is tradition, handed down. That's what tradition is. Finally codified in the Talmud. And then you also have the written Torah, which is, the Tanakh, or the Bible, the law of the prophets and the writings. And in the rabbinic tradition, as in the Catholic tradition, there is a great deal of room for interpretation and adaptation to new events. In Catholicism, it may be a little bit more complicated, but Pope Gregory the Great said that the biblical text grows with the reader, so that reading the Bible, and Vatican II repeats it in Dei Verbum, you begin to discover more and more meanings. Alonso Shekel, a great Jesuit Spanish biblical scholar and translator, whom I had the privilege of meeting in the Gregorian 1996-97, he gave two Advent speeches during those years, said that once the biblical text is written, the umbilical cord is cut, and the text then assumes an existence vis-a-vis the reader, uh, which is somewhat independent of what the original authors were trying to say in very specific circumstances. The point is that I was kind of pleased, I guess, to see that the Bible is so important in Judaism as the fundamental source of theology, so that by thinking about the Bible, this canon, this collection of books, this library, ta Biblia, the books is what the word Bible comes from. That's the source we go to try to think about God. And that's why in Catholicism it's repeated that the Bible is the soul of theology. The Bible properly understood. And so on this page that I have here, which may or may not be legible, it's legible to me, and that's one reason I have it up here. It talks about contemporary Jewish philosophical theologians, including David Blumenthal. And when I saw the name, he was born in 1938, I thought of a tremendous experience I had in Rome in 1997, Good and Evil After Auschwitz, thinking of God, after the Holocaust, or some such title that I forget now the exact title, but I think that Good and Evil After Auschwitz, Ethical Implications for Today, I think that would be the title. So I met at least one of these Jewish philosophers, and they know the medieval and other Jewish traditions of interpreting the Bible. And one of the things that Jews deal with, and that we should all deal with, are the implications of the Holocaust. I happened to Google some pictures. This is a picture of basically children. So that when we think about a God who allows a Holocaust of his people to boot to happen, Blumenthal says that this article says that Blumenthal attempts to construct a post-Holocaust Jewish theology by therapeutically. So part of my talk is psychology. Therapeutically confronting the personal God of Israel as an abusive deity. I've made some videos very recently because I am into this kind of thing right now. Putting God on trial, as that old Jew did. and finding him guilty on 2 counts, and 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 Job. I discussed Job trying to sue God. God is an abusive deity. I'm reading a book called The Savage God by a Jew, Al Alvarez, on suicide. And I think I mentioned that a friend of mine, David, wrote a book, I think, called The Savage Beast, based on Yeats' poem, something I talked about just recently. So, a very Jewish thing to do that I think, if we can properly appropriate it, is confronting God with our complaints and even accusations against Him. And it's therapeutic. Jacob wrestled with God in Genesis 32. I wanted to rewrite my autobiography, uh, titling it, Jacob's Struggle, or something like that. But as you recall, he wrestled with God and wanted a blessing, and that came at the end, and Jacob goes off limping. And that was when I lost my job at the seminary almost 10 years ago. I was in a very devastated state. And this idea of wrestling with God was very strong on my mind. And I wanted to share, my translation here says that the angel, or this man, or this being that wrestles with Jacob, when Jacob asks his name, uh, or actually the being asks Jacob's name, Jacob responds Jacob, and this translation says, "From now on you shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, because you have been strong against God and against men." I don't know whether that's an accurate translation or not, but I read in a great theologian, Gerhard von Rad, that Jacob was amazingly strong, based on this well that is talked about. And I forget if this is the well of Shechem where the Samaritan woman was at. But these wells were communal wells, and they were covered with a huge stone slab that could only be removed by part of the community, so that no one individual could just go and get water. He would have to be part of a communal activity to remove that very heavy stone slab. But Jacob was strong enough to do it himself. The point being that God can be abusive, or can seem to be abusive, but He's abusing people, beginning with His, own Jewish people, who are able to take it. Now, Elie Wiesel, whose memoirs I read, and who's mentioned in this essay uh, as one of the voices that this contemporary Jewish philosophical theologians are trying to respond to. Elie Wiesel, as I recall, says you really can't talk about this Holocaust and God together, because one is speechless. So I've been feeling very down, and I've been struggling with all this stuff, and I've been arguing against God, and I've been very aware, as I've always been, of psychology. And as I've mentioned, our desires to believe. We are anthropologically built, hardwired to keep things simple, clear. The tension of doubt or uncertainty is unpleasant, and we tend to avoid it. And the masses, I have to say it like that, huge numbers of people prefer to latch on to simple, false ideas, even if they're false, as long as it makes them have a sense that they are understanding and that they can confide, for example, in a strong man, a Trump or some dictator, Hitler. So you put on blinders and you believe what you believe, and no evidence in the world will convince you otherwise. Even I know smart people that have chosen that route. And so, being aware of how we want to believe and how we want to be inspired, how we want to read things that will make us feel better. It's basically, I would call it almost eating candy or sweets as opposed to boring broccoli and vegetables and things of that sort. Comfort, food or comfort thoughts. So that since I know that we want to believe in God, this is part of the fuel that sometimes makes me question whether even, whether God even exists, or what kind of God could exist that allows such evil to take place and apparently stands, to the side. Auschwitz being, and the concentration camps being probably the most visible example on a huge scale recently in history. If you see the face of these children, they seem to be strong. They're behind barbed wire. They're dressed in these concentration camp uh, clothes, and 6 million, whatever number of millions, were wiped out. But the Jews were not wiped out. The Nazis were basically wiped out. Well, now we have neo Nazis, which proves what Churchill said: mankind is unteachable. But what I was thinking is that with this struggle with God, questioning God, putting him on trial, thinking he's abusive, that he's trying us beyond our strength, which is something the New Testament says God will not do. Nice thought. Um, it can be looked at as part of the dark night of the soul. It is part of this therapeutically confronting the personal God of Israel. It says here, I say God as an abusive deity. I want to plug a book I have not read, David R. Blumenthal, Facing the Abusive God, A Theology of Protest. So our protest can also be a protest against injustice and indifference. Right now we're dealing with the Putin invasion of Ukraine, and we have to discern these voices that liked Putin. I was listening to Adam Kinzinger one of the very few Republicans that says the truth these days, representatives of the party anyway. And he says, that the same Republicans that coddled up to Putin when Trump was so cozy with him look at events in the world not from a truth or justice perspective. They look at it from how can we use this for winning elections. So if Putin was, a good guy before, now the focus is on Biden as weak. And what Kinzinger said very nicely, if I remember the exact quote, it used to be that partisan politics stopped at the ocean's edge. The nation would be united against foreign, powers, especially threatening ones. But that is no more. It's all a very narrow-minded, how can I stay elected? At the cost of the truth, at the cost of manipulating weak minds, at the cost of fake news and lying and all that kind of stuff. And so, in this dark night of the soul that St. John of the Cross made so famous, we are purified. We are divested of, in Spanish we say apoyos, things to lean on, which is the essence of, I think, faith. In Hebrew, emuna, from the verb aman, where we get the word amen, has to do with firmness, something you can rely on. So that when we lose everything that are props for our faith, blessings from God, good things, family, maybe health, good news, all kinds of things, all those, and things that make us feel warm and fuzzy, we might be tempted to say, oh, how much faith do I have? I cry, I have warm and fuzzy feelings of God, I feel holy. But if much or all of that is removed and you're in a really dark night of the soul where you have nothing, or you feel you have nothing, or you feel what you have is a little drop in a bucket of a flood that is going to overwhelm you. We are wired not just to believe crazy stuff, but we're also wired to turn to God in this nakedness and say, I need you. I think it's one of the things that theologian David Tracy calls limit experiences or something. When you're driven to an extreme of desperation or suffering. And so the readings that I am doing and thinking that goes along with that start helping me come out of a dark night. I remember in the Dominican Republic, I was with the Descalced Carmelites, and there was a kind of crazy Spanish Carmelite there, but he liked to insist with great emotion that one does come out of the dark night of the soul. And obviously he was talking about his own experience or experiences. You can have a lot of dark nights of the soul. And so at night, these days, it takes me a little bit to get to sleep, not too much. I'll wake up around 2 again and maybe have to take a Xanax or something. But I turn to God and I say, I just need you, even though I'm not going to pretend I have great love for you. or even great faith or anything. I just turn to you as God. You're God, I'm not. Do your thing, do something. Send your light. I did a little video on Psalm 42, God sending his truth and his light as emissaries, things he sends to us to give us this strength on the way. And so at the end of the day, we could be left with very little by way of warm and fuzzy or sort of more material comforts. And this is where this dark faith comes in. I think John of the Cross likes to talk about pseudo-Dionysus, apophatic theology. God cannot be represented, God is dark, or he's so much light that he blinds you. But it's not that you can see Padre Pio with the stigmata, and now you believe in God. In the days of St. John of the Cross, I've mentioned they used to go see a nun that climbed the walls or something. They thought that was a manifestation of God because she could climb walls or something. No, pure faith, or as pure as we want. And then this is where the Bible comes in. What is the Bible? The Bible is a record. I think I read it here somewhere. Maybe it's not on this page. The Bible is a record of the responses of a people to God, or a record of the story of a relationship between God and his people. And interestingly enough, that includes the New Testament, which I think is a book written almost all by Jews. Luke might be an exception, but I've had good professors that have cast doubt on that. In fact, I'll tell you the reason. Professor Maynet, in his seminar at the Gregorian University in Rome, he lived in Israel and had Jewish Christian study groups, Messianic Jewish study groups, if you will. And one of the Jewish Christians said Luke had to have been a Jew. Why? Because he loves Jerusalem so much. So my point being that with the story of this people, the Jews, or the Israelites become Jews, whatever, from beginning to the end of even the Christian Bible, is a story full of all kinds of stuff, including prayers, including lamentations, including accusations, as in Job, including tales of extreme suffering, the book of Judith and other books, Maccabees, that is in the Catholic Bible, and massacres and pogroms of all kinds. That is the source we turn to. We turn to a concrete historical source, not because it narrates history in our sense of history, but because it is a 2,000-year span of events that are reflected upon based on this faith of the God of Abraham. I will be your shield. I will be with you, which I think is part of the name of Yahweh, Eye Asher Eye. Another name for Yahweh being Eye, I am. or I will be whom I will be. I will be with you, Imak, Eye Imak. That's the name of God with Jacob, etc. So through all this concentration camp stuff, faith says God is still with us. Even though he may seem to be abusive or indifferent, we turn to him and good things do happen. I went to church yesterday. I went to confession. I went to mass. I didn't buy the son of baconator that I wanted to buy. I had 2 eggs and some crackers for dinner for my diet. You start coming out of the dark night of the soul. For Christians, obviously, Jesus could have said, not only, my God, why have you abandoned me? Which is from Psalm 22. But he could have also said, you're abusive, Abba. But he did not quite go there. A big mystery as to the faith of Jesus. N.T. Wright loves to insist on that translation. Pistis Christou, the faith of Jesus. It's in various passages. I think a famous one would be in Philippians. I may not be able to find it just like that, but it's a reference to Jesus's faith. So he not only, suffered for us and all this, but he had faith. He had faith, and Hebrews also mentions that expression in some other places. Loud cries and tears to the one who could free him, etc. And experienced obedience and arrived at perfection, which is this lack of blemish of these sacrificial animals. The meaning of be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect in the Sermon on the Mount. Tam in Hebrew, and I forget what the Greek, I forget now what, teleos in Greek, of one piece, completely perfected, completely finished, is the idea that is related to this dark night of the soul. So our psychology is important. We should eliminate superstitions. Lack of self-knowledge is very, very bad. St. Catherine of Siena and the mystics insist on knowledge of self. The Greeks did, know thyself, nothing in excess. In other words, cut out what impedes our access to the truth, like fake news. When I start hearing the commercials, I immediately either silence the TV or switch to Italian TV that has no commercials. I don't allow crap to come in and disturb me or pollute me. And when you are in a purer relationship to the truth, then you can follow Gandhi and say, God is truth, truth is God. I am in a purer relationship to God. God has put me through the test. He has tried me. Just like the Book of Wisdom says, and other places say, like gold is purified in the crucible. The end of Daniel chapter 12 also talks about some will be refined. I think even the stay in Egypt is referred to as a furnace which can refine, so that if you want to look on the bright side, getting rid of the dross, I'm not even sure what that means, but the impurities in metals, the impurities in ourself, and impurities I would begin with lying, false notions, superstitions, false beliefs, false attachments. Getting rid of all these are all impediments to this hidden God of Isaiah. Truly, you are a hidden God, the God of Israel. Or maybe you are an abusive God, or you want to reap where you didn't sow. You know, God as very harsh sometimes. I told the story of when I lost my job after 14 years in the seminary. I was devastated, went to Rome, went to confession, and I said to the priest, I feel like I've been put in the operating table, opened up, very painful. When am I going to be sewed back up again? And I thought to myself sometime later, such a serious operation indicates such a serious illness. And so these are the kinds of reflections I think. I haven't read any of these people. I've heard Jacques Derrida, this deconstructionist, Jewish, in Canada. Freud, I am again reading a little bit. I read a lot of Freud many years ago, Jewish, um, with a very strong theory of how our minds work, the unconscious. Not that everything he came up with, especially in his ventures into philosophy or even theology in a way, is correct. But he is an excavator. You know, he went to Rome and would sit there. He'd love to see Michelangelo's Moses in San Pietro in Vincoli, you know, Moses with the horns. But he said, I like Rome because it's full of underground, you know, evidence. And that was a metaphor for the mind and all the stuff underground that we have in our mind that needs to be excavated and maybe put on display and visited. Carol Gilligan, I read her book in a different voice when I was studying Lawrence Kohlberg and was kind of working with Lawrence Kohlberg at Harvard. I think he killed himself. A great philosopher, psychologist, ethical thinker. And so I like to read these things and recognize some of the names anyway. And Elie Wiesel, of course, with the stories of the concentration camps and then the memoirs these are lights in our path. These are people who went through a lot and they have something to teach us. So that Jesus on the cross is our symbol. Let's not forget he was really, you know, the king of the Jews was the accusation. And let's not forget the patterns of history. We have to know them first. How perfect storms can happen. This is the era of great storms. And a war, humiliating conditions, a bad economy, hurt pride, anger, comes a dictator. I was reading this book on suicide, The Savage God, and it says that even if you want to kill yourself, if an emergency comes up, maybe the water leaks in your house or something, you take action. So outside forces can spur you to leave your closed world. I think Al Alvarez talks of the closed world of the suicide. And bad historical moments make a leader rise. Roosevelt, Churchill, and Zelensky now in Ukraine, Jewish by the way, is rising up to this David Goliath situation. Our country, far away from that awareness of the urgency of life and of the planet and of life on the planet. Distracted, divided, manipulating, lying, no vision. How can I get elected? How can I gerrymander to be elected so I can be a politician, all the perks? That's all fodder for the final judgment, and the final judgment, as Shawshank Redemption says on the wall of the corrupt warden of the prison, the right judgment, the final judgment is coming and right soon. I don't say that in a menacing way. I say that in the sense of nothing hidden that shall not be revealed. And I believe that we are called to reflect, to pray, to turn to God, and psychologically and spiritually divest ourselves of untruths and all the things that hinder and keep us down. As the letter to the Hebrews says, shaking off everything that impedes our path, weighs us down. You might even say all the balls and chains that we are slaves to without even knowing it. So that with that, I'm going to stop. Yesterday I did a video trying to talk to myself. Today I'm more in the sharing my thoughts with others mode.